Last week, I saw this SOS for help in a vet chat group. It starts with, "Am I the only one?" I forget the exact wording, but the message that followed encapsulates the frustration of trying to be everything to everyone in a vet clinic so perfectly that it put a lump in my throat. The anonymous vet lists the problems. Nothing feels easy. Client expectations, trying to be thorough, being a good communicator, never feeling good enough. All in 15-minute time blocks. Which is why I'm so excited to get this episode about personal productivity out into the world. Because as you'll hear, you're not alone. I'm Hubert Hemstra, and you are listening to The Vet Vault, where we embrace the challenges of vet life, but we refuse to tolerate things that can be done better. Our guest is Demir Bentley, a recovered workaholic and a productivity coach at Lifehack. And with Demir's help, we've created an episode that is a bit different to our normal episodes. For many, I guess most of you, better productivity means, how do I get through my workload on the clinic floor? How do I see 20 patients and do 7 procedures and do a great job of client comms and clinical records and without losing my mind, and still get out on time and see my friends and have a life?
Here's what I see as an outsider. Number one, with vets, chaos is the default, not the exception, right? You know, you're walking in every day to a packed consult list, walk-ins, emergencies, surgeries are running along. Sometimes you're squeezing in a euthanasia between something extremely mundane, huge emotional load, and then just walking right in and talking to a receptionist about trying to slot just one more thing into your schedule.
Does that sound familiar? So I thought instead of this episode being another one where we discuss my problems, let's get one of you on. So we sent out a message, and Dr. Ray Gates put up his hand with an, "Oh hell yeah, I could use some help with productivity," and the scene was set. So here's what this episode is. Dr. Ray, a vet who is well and truly in the thick of things, being coached by Demir, a world-class productivity coach, on what specific levers Ray can pull in the vet clinic to give himself some breathing room. Now, this is not just generic productivity stuff. We get deep into the vet-specific weeds that, as you'll hear, you will be all too familiar with. I hope you find this as useful as I did. I think you will. Oh, by the way, if you have an idea for a topic that you would personally like help with, shoot me an email at info@thevetvault.com. I won't roll my eyes, I promise, and we will find someone smart to help us work through it together. But for now, please enjoy Dr. Ray Gates and Demir Bentley. Why productivity? What's the point? Is it just so we can do more shit and be busier and make more money? Why are we even talking about this? Why did you get passionate about it?
It's funny because I think people assume that since I'm a productivity coach that I'm going to say, "Oh, this is the best thing in the world and you should love this." And actually, people are surprised to hear me say, "No, productivity is as boring as bricks." And I'm not here to convince you that it's not. You know, my key value is freedom in life and resilience. If you've got freedom and resilience, there's very little you can't do. And it just so happens that being able to rely on yourself, having the right workflows and systems to bring out the best in yourself and to sort of get work done in a small package so you can get back to being a real person, that's the number one tool that puts your tires against the pavement and gives you that friction to move forward in your life. So yes, this stuff is incredibly boring. I happen to find it exciting after years of doing it, but I will completely concede to the layman that, you know, it looks boring from the outside, and I'll spoil the ending. It is boring on the inside too. But what you get after you've done it is days where you can get home and turn off and be with your kids, or the time to go on vacation without your team, you know, send you crazy messages when you're on your Italian vacation. We don't know where that thing is. So that's why I love productivity, freedom, and resilience.
So podcast making 101 is you have to have a strong hook within the first few seconds so that the listeners keep listening. Saying this, it's boring, is not a great start. So it's boring, but keep listening. Don't go anywhere. I like that you say to me, so that you can rely on yourself. That's actually a great way to put it. I read a blog once. It's that Wait But Why blog. I don't know if you've come across it, but there was a phenomenal blog in there about procrastination, in which I suppose you could apply the same principles to if you don't have good productivity systems. And the principle in that was that you today, You're not the same person as you tomorrow and you next week. It's a different human being, right? That person is going to be in the present in that moment. And me today procrastinating, or in this case, being disorganized, I'm screwing over future Hubert. I'm saying, all right, I'm having a crazy day today. I don't feel like doing this stuff, but Hubert, 5 days from now, you're going to have double the problem. You're going to have to deal with it. And the point was, would you do that to somebody else, like to a stranger? No, you're probably going to be more considerate. And it's actually just a case of being more considerate to your future self. So I like that view of productivity, potentially saying, well, let's have good systems so that tomorrow's Hubert doesn't have a really shitty day.
I love it, but we're not here for my story. We're here for Ray's. But the short version of my story is I went from working 80 to 100 hours on Wall Street, making 6 figures, to working less than 20 hours a week, making multi-7 figures. And that was a journey in productivity. So if somebody's looking for the real wow factor in productivity, all the cash and prizes that you're looking for in life. Can you make more money if you're more productive? Absolutely. Can you get more time because people love time? Absolutely. Can you get more recognized? Can you move your mission into the world? 100%. All of these end up stemming back to, can you sit down at your desk and organize yourself in a way where you can move yourself forward?
I'm excited to learn for selfish reasons, but as you say, today's about Ray. Ray, tell us the story of Ray and why you feel like you need Demir's help.
Well, I guess it's tough to start. I guess to start off, I do have ADHD, so that's always been a balancing act for me. So one of the things that I've always tried to do is be productive, really, is because that's like my main struggle in life, because I procrastinate a lot. I just think I push things off. I'm not very considerate to my future self, basically, like you said, Hugh. I've always wanted to be a veterinarian. That's been my goal in life, and that's what I've worked towards pretty much most of my life. There's no way I would have gotten there if I hadn't properly learned to start managing my ADHD, but I do still struggle with it a lot. And working as a vet, I do feel like when I'm at my job, I can be quite productive. I can move quite quickly, but then outside of it, that all seems to kind of fall apart. And I lose that motivation to kind of get things done very quickly. And I guess maybe part of it is because I don't have as many people relying on me to be productive. I don't know if that's the difference here, but.
Well, Ray, you did an awesome thing in advance of this call, which is you actually filled out my pre-call coaching survey. So what I'm going to do, if I can step in, is I'm going to sort of take a shot at describing you based on what you told me. And then that could be a good jumping off point where you could fill in some blanks that maybe I'm missing. So here's what I know about Ray so far. You are a 33-year-old small animal GP veterinarian in Sydney. You work crushingly long hours, 10 to 12 hour shifts. Some weeks include full weekends. You live with your partner, who's also a full-time vet. Mm-hmm. You are maintaining U.S. relationships remotely, which is always going to be hard and include a lot of early morning and late night calls. You have a bodybuilding lifestyle in your personal life, which just means that, for me as a productivity coach, means that your central nervous system is probably pretty tapped a lot if you're doing heavy lifts and you're at the gym quite a bit, but also means that you're probably in great shape. So it's probably positives and negatives on that side. You're probably in great shape, but also you're tapping out your central nervous system quite a bit. So you're a vet, you're a partner, you're a son, you're a friend. The schedule is punishingly rigid and front loaded. You are getting up sometimes at 3:30 a.m. to go to the gym, sometimes 4.5 hours before you work. Yeah. There's no discretionary space at work, lots of context switching, lots of emotional labor, decision making, sort of the classic ingredients for ADHD, overwhelmed. In fact, I was quite impressed that somebody with ADHD went into the veterinary field, because, as I'll describe in a second, it is just an absolute crush of cognitive dissonance and cognitive overload. So how does that sound so far? Am I barking up the right tree?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. If you could get just one thing from this session, and you don't have to even know the answer to this question, but I'm just going to ask it anyways. If you could just get like one awesome thing from this session, what would it be?
I guess a good starting point to improving my feeling of timelessness, really.
Yeah. quick follow-up question. I think I know the answer, but I just want to see, are you a practice owner or are you working in a practice that's owned by somebody else?
I'm an employee.
Okay, got it. For anybody who's listening, that bounds this conversation because on the positive, that means you're also not trying to be a small to mid-sized business owner. But on the negative, it means that, as I'm giving advice, there's certain advice that you might not be able to integrate because you don't own the practice and you might not have full discretion to change how things are done inside the practice. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. There might be some things where you're like, that's not really my call to put something like that to work. Sound fair?
Yep.
Let me just start with what I know, Ray, about veterinarians as someone who's worked the last 11 years and weirdly it started with a strong background in veterinarians. There was one woman from the UC Davis Correct Shelter Medicine program who took my coaching early on and told all of our friends to come in. And so I've done a weirdly large amount of coaching with veterinarians. And here's what I see as an outsider. And remember, I am an outsider. Number one, with vets, chaos is the default, not the exception, right? You're walking in every day to a packed consult list, walk-ins, emergencies, surgeries are running along. Sometimes you're squeezing in a euthanasia between something extremely mundane, huge emotional load, maybe talking somebody down who's just let go of like a member of their family, and then just walking right in and talking to a receptionist about trying to slot just one more thing into your schedule. So just what I've seen from the outside is one, the types of work that you bounce between inside of a day is just, it could be admin to something technical, to something logistical, to something emotional. Does that resonate with, am I seeing it from the right on the outside?
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate to how my day goes.
Okay.
I'm going to add a little bit of extra context. You seemed surprised that we've got an ADHD vet. My personal experience from now that it is a conversation out there and speaking to a lot of vets, neurodivergence is a big thing in our profession. So there's something with the link with working with animals. I think a lot of vets think that, I'm going to work with animals, and they neglect the fact that it's very people heavy, and often intelligent people, right? They can power through the struggles that they have to get through the degree. Because clearly, Ray, you are able to focus because you got through a vet degree, and there's a lot of sitting on your ass and just getting stuff done. But we force our way through it. So that just to add another layer there. So I bet that a lot of people listening to this are going, "Oh, yep, Ray's described me. That's me. I have this challenge," and then exactly that environment that you just described. Bad systems, which is a big issue, as you say. We're often powerless to do anything about it as employees. Lots of chaos. Exactly what you said. Spot on.
So really quickly, I'll touch on some of the other things that I think are worth mentioning, right? So we talked about a massive emotional load, right? Euthanizing a long-time patient, or, managing an angry client, or just having an impossible choice, giving an impossible choice to people who can't afford care, right? So it's just a huge emotional load, which sometimes I think a lot of my doctors and veterinarians don't always clock because they have sort of put a wall up, but so they don't clock how much it's costing them energetically because they are sort of moving on to the next thing, but they've sort of have paid a price, as it were. Again, the workflow is just really distracting and brutal, right? You're moving between diagnostics and procedural tasks and documentation and client communication and collaboration. And it's just really fatiguing, right? And we know about human beings that we're not multitaskers. We're actually just rapid single taskers. And that it costs us a lot to move from type work A to type work B. And the veterinary world is just riddled with that. I mean, people are probably laughing when they're listening to this. It's just thinking about the 40 or 50 different types of things they're bouncing between every single day. And it has to happen that way. And also, of course, long work weeks, right? Irregular work weeks. So it's hard to sort of know what you're in for until you're already sort of in it or already through it. And really hard to make time. I think you had mentioned that you were trying to make some time for some professional development. Did I make that up?
No, you didn't make it up, but yes, I am trying to make time for I have an interest in surgery, but I have an interest in everything. So I have a hard time kind of like figuring out where to start. So orthopedics is like kind of that's my main one. I want to learn orthopedic surgery in general.
Yeah.
But then the way my mind thinks about it is like, it's such a big undertaking to kind of do the CPD for it, or the continuing education. And then I don't know when to start because I have something else going on that's going to be happening soon. And it's just like, it kind of like snowballs in a way. Just getting that taking that first step is difficult.
Yep. I get it. Well, and where are you going to find the time, Ray, in that world that I just described, right? Working super long hours, getting up at 3:30 in the morning, right? Incredible cognitive load. You know, I just wanted to just take a pause to mention that. And I think before we get started coaching together, and I've got a couple things that I came preloaded to talk to you about, you know, I think there's a lot of self-blame because the vet profession really has this sort of hero mindset, right? I'm supposed to be the hero, never make mistakes, carry the load for everybody, stay late, you know, be strong for the team. And so there is a feeling like if you're getting to the end of yourself, like, hey, why can't I go further? Why can't I be the person who does this? Or why couldn't I have created that outcome? Or why did I make that mistake, right? And it's like not a shock that, as you know, I'm sure anybody who's listening, one of the highest self-harm rates among professions is veterinarians. So, you know, not to make things heavy, people, but this is real stuff and it's serious. And you're not alone if you're out there feeling this. So thank you again, Ray. I just wanted to take a moment to just make sure that like we were speaking the same language. Do you feel generally from hearing what I'm saying that I'm, for an outsider, more or less get it and understand what you're facing?
Yeah. I mean, so far it sounds fairly accurate to my profession.
Yeah. It's an inherently overwhelming profession with insanely long hours. I just want to observe one thing, Ray. One of the things that we have supporting us when we are working long hours is that we can often get into a bit of a high cortisol fight or flight state where the very thing that I was describing, the cognitive dissonance or the cognitive overwhelm, it's stimulation, right? So you're always getting hit by something new. So that sense of, I don't know what I'm walking into next. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. Can I get it done? Can I be the hero who sort of lands the plane here in the midst of like two flaming engines? That is stimulation. And a lot of my clients who have extremely stimulating high chaos environments will go home and be like, well, why am I completely comatose when I get home? And I just want to be clear. Sometimes we are motivated and getting work done from a place that's essentially more of a fight or flight state than it is a positive leaned in state. And so, of course, there's going to be this insane crash when you come home because what you've been doing is you've really been using extrinsic motivation, extrinsic accountability. If I don't show up and I don't do this thing, then one of my patients is going to die. That high level of tension and motivation is stimulating. Is it good? I'll let you be the judge, but it is definitely stimulating. So no wonder then we go home and we can't get off the couch, right? Or we go home and we can't, motivate to, do this professional development that you're talking about. We've sort of put ourselves through that. So I just want to make sure that we aren't mistaking the difference between, an external stimulus that's driving us into a plate of sort of high level of cortisol and fight or flight that's getting us to get the job done versus say, oh, I'm great. Why am I great at, and just to boil it down, I don't want you asking the question of yourself, why am I so great at work? And I just I'm on and I just get the thing done and then I go home and I just can't access that. Well, you've effectively got a gun to your head at work, right? And you've got this high level of stimulation. So of course, you're going to pay the price when you come home. I'm going to pass the mic to you, Raymond. How does that land with you when I say it like that?
Well, I think you've perfectly described how someone with ADHD finds motivation. We get a lot of our motivation and drivers through our fight or flight system. So fear, deadlines. So that's when procrastinate. That's just me and my ADHD mind getting ready to be like, oh, this is due soon. And then that's that scramble, that fear of not meeting the deadline is what gets me to do the work. So that kind of external driver is how I feel, is how I get most things done at work. Cause it's like, I'm kind of like effectively body doubling, but with the client that I'm working with and their pet and the other vets. It's like I can't let these people around me down. So let's get this done.
Yeah, totally. So here's two angles that I think we can come at this from that can give you something that you can grab onto and maybe take away from today. The first angle is just this idea of, it really comes from the Stoics, right? The Stoics teach us don't focus on the 99% of the problem that you can't fix. Focus on the 1% of the problem that you can. I do have a lot of clients. I have a client in crisis management PR, for example. You can imagine that when her phone rings, there's not a happy person on the other side. This person is going through a once in a lifetime terrible experience if that phone is ringing. So there's so much that cannot be controlled in terms of how's this week going to go? What am I going to face? How intense is it going to be? Right? What systems, in your case, you don't control the systems of the business. So, what systems am I operating in? It can be very easy in that kind of situation to just sort of say, well, what's the point? I'll just let myself float out to the ocean and get rolled around by the waves, because what's the point? I can't control 99% of this. And in a weird way, when we can't control most of our environment, it becomes so important that we do control the bits that we can. That, what I call that 1%. And so I just encourage you overall to have a mindset where you sort of allowed yourself to stop fixating or focusing. I don't know if you are, I don't want to fictionalize that, but don't fixate on the 99% you cannot control. Focus in on the 1% that you can. So I'll just give you an example from a vet that I know. I actually had a chance to call a couple vets before I had this conversation. One of the vets that I was talking to was saying that she had a audio dictation software for her notes, but she didn't like it because it just did a transcript. It didn't actually do a summary. It just actually did word for word. So she didn't use it, didn't really bother training in it. And then she would get behind sometimes on her charting almost 2 weeks. So she's trying to remember 2 weeks ago. She's like, I don't remember this person. I don't remember this animal. I don't remember this situation. She's spending a tremendous amount of cognitive load trying to re-piece together some kind of context so that she can at least do a semblance of her professional duty here for her charting, right? By the way, you're nodding your head. I'm not saying you've ever done that. You've never done that. But do you know what I'm talking about here? Yeah. So the 1% for her was just to say, okay, maybe I don't love the word for word transcript, but wouldn't it be so much easier to do my charting if I had something there to go on? Like anything, so that I could, when I'm coming back, I've left myself a breadcrumb trail where I can actually piece this back together. Hopefully you're not getting 2 weeks behind on your charting. I assume you're not, but you get the point, right? It's like a 1% thing. And as it turned out, she said it was literally a button that had to be activated. It was that simple. It's just something that in her busy crush of life, she just hadn't bothered doing. Let me just pause. As I say that, forget that specific example, because that's just something I picked out. Is there anything that comes to you right now where you think, maybe this is something I should be doing? It's small. It's something within my control. I don't do it as much as I should, or I don't do it ever. And that is a place where I could exercise control.
In all honesty, probably going to bed sooner.
Yeah. Talk to me about that.
I often get home fairly late. So I guess most nights it's going to be 9 p.m.-ish, around then, 8:30, 9 p.m. And then it's kind of like the small amount of me time that I have, or the time I can spend with my partner. And in my mind, I kind of that's the time I want to take back. So instead of just feeling like a cog in a wheel, waking up in the morning, just working, then coming home, going to bed, that time is something to take back. So I will eat dinner and hang out with my partner, but then my partner will go to bed, and then I'll stay up and do something stupid, watch a show, play a video game. I don't know. It's whatever I feel like doing at the time. But then that ends up, I'm going to bed at probably midnight, 1.
Yeah. I mean, if you're getting up at 4, I presume you're not going to sleep at midnight on the days when you're getting up at 4 to go to the gym, or is that sometimes the case?
Sometimes it can come close to that. I'll go to bed at 11, still only 5 hours of sleep.
Yeah. So welcome to the revenge binge, right? You've been so disciplined. You're getting up early. You're working out. You're doing your job. Here we are. Willpower's low at the end of the day. Revenge binge.
Never heard it called that, but I think I will start.
One of the things that I do that's really interesting is we can put some speed bumps in front of bad behavior. So you think about the environment. And those little timers that you plug into the wall, and you could plug your lamp into them, and they will sort of on certain hours, they'll turn on the power, they'll turn off the power. I plugged my Wi-Fi router into one of those. And my Wi-Fi downstairs would go off at like 10 o'clock every night. And it seemed like it was a mystery to me. Every single night, I would turn to my wife and be like, well, what is going on? Is your internet not working? She was like, yeah, it went out, dummy. And yes, I could go turn it back on, but I'd have to get up. I'd have to get out of my bed, leave my room, go downstairs, hit the master router and switch back on. And, I was just too lazy. And I realized in that moment, I was tired. So instead of me telling you something banal like, oh, you should just definitely try to go to sleep more. It's like, believe me, I've been there. When you're in the middle of a revenge binge, it's hard to pull yourself out. But if we could create an extrinsic motivator, an extrinsic barrier, it can be just enough. I'm not saying it'll work every night, but it can be just enough for you to sort of say, you know what? I am tired. Maybe I will go to bed. Maybe this is a good signal to sort of pop me out of my stupor and just make me think, okay, I need to get to bed here. This is crazy. It's also a little bit of an alarm clock to sort of say, oh, is it really 10 already? Now, I want to circle back to the 1% concept and just talk about maybe some more vet-specific examples of this, right? One of my vets there's something called, keyboard shortcuts. And a lot of computers have it, where you could sort of pre-compose snippets and you could say hashtag, COM, and it could put your regular communication module in there. And so what she effectively did was she built out a lot of the snippets that would go into her regular charting as keyboard shortcuts, so that as she was going through her, writing out her chart and taking her notes, she was just making it a little bit faster to get something in there, just a little bit faster to pull those notes together. So it's just an example of something we can control, right? Another vet that I was working with, because one of the common phrases that I heard was, I can't keep my consults on track, right? And of course, when we've got an emotional client who likes to talk, how are you going to keep that on track? One of the sort of phrases that you can mention at the top is, hey, we've got limited amount of time together. So just to make sure that we can make the most of this time, would you mind if I ask for permission to interrupt you? Not to annoy you, just to make sure that we make the most of this time together and do the best for, little Rex here, or, Mr. Ham Sandwich, or whatever it is. So you're asking for permission at the top to interrupt somebody, which at that time doesn't feel offensive because you've just started the conversation. But it becomes really handy when they do start to get into story time and you need to interrupt them. So you've sort of secured that permission at the top, and you can come back in later and say, hey, sorry to interrupt you. Just like I said, I might interrupt you. Do you mind if I ask this follow-up? So you're actually giving yourself, you're preloading that permission. These small things that you can do, and again, how much time does that save you? Who knows, but you're doing so many consults a day. If you can keep 2 or 3 consults on track that might have gone off track, that can really have a little bit of a 1%, domino fall into the rest of your day if 2 or 3 of those consults stay on track versus getting off track. Or, for example, batch reading all your labs at once, setting a time or a couple times a day to sit down instead of getting those interruptions. So let me toss it to you. As I say that, and we're thinking actually about the work as it happens at work, does this shake anything loose for you to think, what are those little 1% things that I could do to just claim back a little bit of control in my workday?
I've already, like you were saying earlier about the snippets and the shortcuts with notes. I've actually done that quite extensively. So that's one area that I've kind of regained control back a little bit. But I also use AI to take my notes now. And I've written a bunch of templates out for that will do that for me. And I just edit things so I can actually just pay attention to the client in the consult room. I don't have to touch the computer while they're talking.
I have to jump in here. This, I think, is huge. As many of you would know, I'm big on experimenting with AI to see how I can move the needle on the 1%. And what I'm seeing is that it's more like 10 to 20% or more. Ray is talking about AI note-taking, but the possibilities are way beyond that. I believe this so much that I'm working on a project to help myself and you, other vets, figure out how to best utilize this absolute avalanche of new tech tools that's rushing our way to make a meaningful difference in not only our productivity as a vet or a clinic owner, but also our wellness and the wellness of our teams. And how can we use it to be better at our jobs, which ultimately is providing excellent care to animals. I'm working on a community for vets and practice owners who would like to learn with me in a sort of a mashup between a mastermind group and a course. But before I commit days and weeks to doing this, I'd love to know from you whether this is a worthwhile endeavor. If you think it is and you would like to hear more about it when I have more details for you, go to yespleaseyou.com. I just built that little email capture landing page in 10 minutes with the help of AI. I can teach you how. That's yes and please and my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, all mashed into one word.com. If that's too hard, I'll put a link for you in the show description. Okay, back to Demir and Ray.
I actually have, I feel, a problem, which maybe some won't say it's a problem, but I feel like it can be sometimes, is that I will try and mush all of the problems that the owner brings to me and fix them in that single consult.
Mm-hmm.
And that will extend the consult significantly.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't want to half-ass each problem, but I feel like that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was talking about that sentence earlier, that can I have your permission to interrupt, not to annoy, just to make sure that we can do the best we can with the time we have. Sometimes a really well-composed sentence can really smooth the path. So I wonder if you could work with ChatGPT a little bit, or your AI, to come up with that perfect sentence that sounds something like, hey, you know what we have time to do today is we can do A and B and C today, but I'm going to have, Marcy outside work with you to schedule a follow-up for D and F and G. How's that sound for you? Right? That sort of pre-composed, memorized sentence that allows you that permission. And you're securing their buy-in too. You're saying, hey, why don't we handle these things? We could really do that in the time we have. I'm going to get Marcy to schedule for your follow-up for DC or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that topic up because it just nails the concept that we're talking about. And for anybody listening, what are we talking about here? Category 1 is just, where's that 1% where we can exercise some control? And if we can really focus in on that and collect all of those 1%, what we'll always find is a little bit like a thread. You think to yourself, well, this is the only 1% I can control. Once you control that, you'll see that another 1% manifests itself. Oh, you know what? I could also do this. Oh, once you've done that, oh, you know what? I guess I could also do this. So there's just these little things. You can also start to look outside of your immediate range of control. I had a vet who was working at a shelter that she didn't own, and she realized they didn't have a PDF that the client could read in the waiting room about euthanasia. They just walked every single time a client came in. They were giving the same spiel over and over and over and over and over again. And so she just took it upon herself. Hey, do you mind if I actually go and create a PDF, print out some pamphlets, and just leave it in the waiting room? And she asked the receptionist to say, hey, when somebody's coming in and it's going to be euthanasia, can you have them read this while they're waiting and filling things out? It just means they're going to come in a little better prepped. It could even be a send ahead email if you know somebody's coming in ahead of time to let go of a family member that they really care about, right? Now, are they all going to read that? Absolutely not. But enough of them read it to really start to be that 1% easing of, okay, I'm not having to do the same spiel over and over and over again. So send aheads, things they can read in the waiting room. These are the kinds of things that could really support you in the room so that your session doesn't get extended.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Demir? Is the goal of trying to smooth out the workday, which exactly as you said, it is a cognitively draining day. Ray said that he feels that he does well enough at work. It's the outside of work that bothers him. Is the goal of tweaking this so that you don't have that extreme comatose feeling at the end of the workday and potentially get home an hour earlier?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a wild guess to say that when somebody's working 10 to 12 hours a day, often over the weekends, there's no personal failing that's preventing him from showing up with energy in his personal life. He's not showing up with energy in his personal life because he's just completely drained by work. And so what we're doing is we're reclaiming some of that cognitive drain and that emotional drain and that intellectual drain at work. Really funny thing I never would have thought that I would have said to somebody after 10 years of doing this productivity work is that I can have clients we will work to reduce cognitive load inside of their workflow. They will work the same exact amount of hours, but come home with more energy to do something after work. So yes, I do want to get my clients working fewer hours, but I've actually worked with a lot of medical professionals where they're on a shift. They're going to work those hours no matter what. The hospital owns you for those hours. And so the game when your sort of hours are owned by, the clinic or the hospital isn't like, I'm going to get out early. The game is, how can I get through this while preserving my emotional and cognitive load so that when I come back, I can be daddy, I can be husband, I can actually want to go out to dinner with friends instead of being so drained that just sounds terrible to me.
Wait, the revenge binge.
Or the revenge binge, precisely.
Yeah.
So that
Okay.
last one, Raymond, I think really pivots into the second, and it's a little bit out of your control, but you'd be surprised how much, again, it is in your control. So the second category would be what's happening upstream that's causing this to happen to you downstream. A lot of times we think about a stressor or something that's suboptimal, or, for example, a consult going long or consult going wrong. And we think about that as, what could I have done in that moment to change that? And often the answer is, by that time, it was too late. By that time, that was the only way that could have happened. It was never going to go a different way because there was a chain event of things that went wrong to put that person in that place and create that situation that I then had to respond to. So a lot of times it is actually virtually impossible for us to exercise power when we're trying to swing it from the now end of it. What we can often do is go upstream 1, 2, 3 steps and ask ourselves, what could I have changed upstream a couple steps that wouldn't have just made that situation better, will actually make the next 50 of those situations a little bit better. So I sort of reference this idea of, hey, can we do send aheads for some of the more emotionally taxing experiences that we have? Could we do an email send ahead? Could we do a PDF send ahead? Could we do a pamphlet in the office? Or even, these kinds of these small things. It could even just be one of my vets. She didn't know how to tell her receptionist how to schedule her because it was just so chaotic. What do you say to them? Right? Like how do you schedule the chaos? So what she did was she came up with 5 good examples and 5 bad examples. She went back about 10, 12 weeks. She found 5 weeks that went really well. And she said, hey, I don't know what it was about how you stacked this in, but I love this. I love this. This flowed into this. This worked really nicely with this. And then she found 5 weeks that were just an absolute nightmare. And she said, okay, this made it really, really hard for me. And even though they didn't derive a hard and fast set of rules, just that exercise of going upstream and doing a little bit of extra training and a little bit of extra context sharing with the receptionist, she said that it just got so much better from there because it was that sharing of that information. Hey, this is a week like this can really hit me in a hard way. So what's interesting about that kind of control is that's not really something you always have to ask for permission for. So even people, I would say definitely if you're a vet, if you own a clinic, you absolutely want to be on this level, looking not just at what went wrong, but what was 2 or 3 steps above what went wrong, so that you can actually say, hey, this is my job as a vet owner to actually step 2 or 3 steps, 4 steps above. But even as an employee, you can often collaborate with your coworkers and say, hey, do you think we could just tweak this a little bit, do it a little bit more like this instead of like this? So summing that up, there's an impossibility of trying to control situations in the moment that are uncontrollable. But sometimes when we take 2 or 3 steps upstream from that moment or back in time from that moment, we realize there is something that could have been controllable. It'll never make that bad situation change. That stunk. We had to deal with that. But we can change the next 50 of those that happen.
I really do love that, Demir. I've found over the years, so I have 25 years in practice, and Raymond very much. I was going to say, start of my career, all of your problems sound so familiar, but still, I still do shifts, clinical shifts, and it's still far from perfect. But a mindset shift of feeling like a victim, feeling like these things are completely out of my control, Demir. And often they are not completely out of your control. You do have agency in saying, all right, there are these problems. My boss is probably way too busy to even think about them. They're not even aware that it's a problem. what can I do? What can I bring to the boss, to the rest of the team? What systems can I help put in place? Exactly as you say, how can I make it easier for myself? And then a constant awareness. And now it's become almost an obsession for me at work. When I do something and I get an inkling of irritation or frustration of this is taking me so long, I'm getting angry. The question is immediately, okay, but how can I do this better? How can this whole process be easier? And then it's a question of having the time and energy to do it, which brings us back to the main problem. But it is just, let me fix one thing. What's the thing that drives me the craziest on shift? And how can I make it just a little bit better for myself?
Well, and you spoke about ADHD. And one of the things that people with ADHD are amazing at doing is when they're really fixated on something, and sometimes that means they're pissed off or frustrated about it, is they've got a lot of focus and energy to change that thing. And let's not underestimate that sometimes these things don't take a huge amount of raw time to change. So I often tell people, you know, that sort of really pissed off energy that you have when something goes really wrong, that's actually a very productive energy, right? Like if you don't direct it at a coworker and you don't direct it at yourself or the clinic owner, if you actually direct it at the problem, you can sort of say, you know what, screw this. I never want a consult to go like that again, or I never want that mistake to happen again, or I never want to have that experience again. It's really motivating to step 2 or 3 steps above and say, what would we have to change? Or what would the smallest 1% change be that could either prevent that or make it a lot more bearable? I want to check with you, Raymond. How is some of this landing right now? And what are the big themes that are emerging for you?
I guess, yeah, a lot of my day, what brings me a lot of stress is the fact of how unpredictable it is. Because like I'll come out of a consult and I'll think I have like maybe 10 minutes to do something, and instead an emergency has been squeezed into that slot, or it's like a change to my preconceived, like this is like how my day is going, and it throws me for a loop. So that's definitely a big one that kind of gets me. I don't like being like flip-flopped and kind of like having to go to all these different things. The weird thing is, though, is if it's already chaotic, I do fine. So what I feel that means for me is that if I have an expectation of chaos, then I manage it fine. If I don't have an expectation of chaos and I have a calm day, but then it turns into chaos, and I get very stressed. So if there's anything I think that would be a major like contributor to my cognitive overload through the day, it'd be those days that don't start off as chaotic. So I don't know if a mindset shift to expect chaos every single day would be healthy, but it seems like something that would maybe help a little bit in those instances.
Yeah. Well, again, the Stoics said, premeditatio malorum, right? The meditation on future evils. So they encouraged us, instead of avoiding thinking about what could go wrong, they encouraged us to really, in a frank and very clear way, ask ourselves what could go wrong here so we can be prepared for it. And what can I do in advance to prepare for that, right? And so I think the word that you used was expectation. I don't know if you've heard this saying that expectation is like pouring yourself with gas and hoping to God that nobody strikes a match, right? It's like you could get away with it. You could pour yourself with gasoline and walk outside and have your whole day and come home and be fine. But if somebody strikes a match, you're in trouble. And so having that expectation, gosh, I hope that this is a calm day, and then it doesn't, well, the match has been struck. So I don't think it's about, it sounds very defeatist to say, well, I'll just assume every day it's going to be chaos. But I do think there's a positive twist on this, which is, hey, I need to open myself up to the possibility every day that there is a way that this day could go wrong, and be ready for that, and have it sort of lower my expectation down a little bit. So now you're expecting that it could be chaos, and you might find out as a nice treat that it wasn't, right? Rather than hoping that it'll be ordered and then getting lit on fire when it's not. And I think expectations is actually a pretty high level of advanced mindset, expectations management throughout the course of your day. You've stumbled on something that's pretty high level in terms of the productivity world, because when we can manage our expectations correctly, Deepak Chopra says, set a goal and then remove the expectation from it, right? So we set the goal, I'd like to get this done today, but we're removing the expectation from it so that we don't get lit on fire in that way. I think that could be very powerful practice for you.
I'm going to write that down.
It's such a good insight. You've absolutely nailed it, Ray, because in my working career, my clinical career, I've had many years of GP practice and many years in emergency practice. And you are spot on. It's the thing that drives me the maddest. I'm back in GP now. If my day is X at the start of the day, if I have a plan, this is how I'm going to run my day. And then something out of my control ruins it. But then in emergency, I have none of that because it's all chaos. Not chaos, but there's no appointments. We have no appointments, so I have no structure. I walk in, blank slate. Well, hit me with what you got. And because the client's expectations are also, I don't have an appointment, so I'm going to wait for 2 hours if I have to wait for 2 hours. So everybody's just like, well, we just get through the work. And it's such a different emotional experience between the two. It's like the days when I was on call as a GP vet, I'd be so anxious and so angry when I do get a call out versus when you work in emergency. Well, I'm here to be called at 2 a.m, so I'm not going to get angry when it happens.
So Hugh, from your perspective, I also wonder what you're taking away from this and what the high level thoughts are for you that are coming up.
One thing that I keep thinking, listening to this, is from personal experience and then empathizing with Ray, is that our profession are we're very bad at planning the days, at making this easier for employees. As clinic owners and clinic managers, and it's the system. That's the way the system is set up. It's a low profit margin business, so you've got to squeeze in as much as you can in the day. So it's very hard for a business owner to say, no, you can't squeeze in that emergency and Ray's 10-minute break that he had planned. But I still think we should. I think as a profession, we need to grow up and go. We do not have to run the way you described. I do not have to make Ray work a 12-hour shift because poor Ray has a life outside of that, and nobody. I experience this because I've got my two lives. I have my clinical job 1 or 2 days a week, and then I have my podcasting days and my online business. And the difference in how put it this way, when I do a clinical day and it's a busy day, which is a standard GP day that keeps me away from home from when I leave home till I get back, often 12 hours, I feel it the next day because the next day is so dependent on being sharp, being energetic, because I have to be self-driven because it's just me. I'm the boss. I don't have the gun to my head. I have to sit at my computer, decide to work. And the day after a clinical shift is always predictably, noticeably much harder because I've spent so much energy on that previous day. And then I cannot stop thinking about all of my colleagues who do this 4 or 5 days a week. And then I'm surprised that they are burnt out, tired, and no energy to do anything else. I'm like, there's something inherently wrong. I always say it's like it's an extreme metaphor, but it's the First World War when they had the trench warfare and they made people go over the top and run into machine gun fire. It's a bit like saying, well, let's train those soldiers better to be more resilient and to be tougher and to improve their aim, but we're still sending them into machine gun fire. Yeah. It's just not going to work. So I do feel like I love the things we're discussing, and they do work at 1%, but I wish we could start editing the 99% dramatically as well. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
No, if we were speaking with a clinic owner, it'd be a very different conversation because it would be coming more from the systems level down to the personal. And it is, admittedly, Ray, harder to swing it from the personal up. But the truth is that you can. And I hope that everybody who's listening here hears a very simple message, which is when you focus on the 1% that you can control and you keep stacking those up, it might seem so small that it's meaningless, right? It might seem so small that it's like picking, change up off of the street. Like, well, what does it matter? Is it even worth picking it up? But if you do it enough and there's a compounding effect, you start to get into a place where you're like, wow, I actually can feel a little bit of a difference. I can feel I'm a little bit less tired. I can feel that I'm a little bit more able to be myself after work. So I would say don't sleep on the benefit of the 1% changes and controlling those things that you can. Mm-hmm. I'll just squeeze one more thing in, Ray, and then I'm going to pass it to you. And also just don't underestimate that every clinic owner in the world is probably just praying that their team cares enough to suggest systems improvements, right? I would say most of the clients that I've had that were clinic owners would love that and would really, heartily embrace the kind of employee who cared enough to suggest a system improvement, even if I didn't take it. Anyways, over to you, Ray.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The 1% thing, I can already feel a few things coming to mind that I've thought about in the past about what can make things go a bit more smoothly through the day. Just like even something as small as like the naming of appointments, what the presenting complaint is, adding a reason. Like sometimes I'll see my schedule, and the scheduling that we use has color coded consults, and it means specific consult, but like you can still not know exactly what they're coming in for unless a reason is written, and sometimes it's not. So
Yeah.
that something there. That's just like one of the things that popped up. But I do like the set a goal but remove expectation that you said, because I think every time I set a goal, I set myself a deadline, and then as a result, I don't do it, and I get anxiety about it. So yeah, that would be helpful if I could kind of shift my mindset to not be so hard on myself, I guess, because
Mm.
I feel like that's a big downfall for me is I am my worst critic, and I'm sure a lot of other people are also their worst critics, but yeah, it seems to hinder me a lot more than I would like.
Yeah. And I would just say that's all energy, right? So the thing with time is we can measure it. We can measure our time. I took longer, I took shorter. When we are draining energy, say feeling guilty or punishing ourselves or having a shattered expectation, that cost is paid. It's just that it's really hard to detect where it gets paid. And so one of the things I encourage my clients to do is get mad, get frustrated, but don't get mad or frustrated at yourself. Direct all of that energy towards a solution, no matter how small. Do not inflict that upon yourself, or heaven forbid you're inflicting on the people you work with either, or even worse, come home at night and inflict it upon your loved ones, right? It's okay to get mad and frustrated, but direct all of that energy like a laser beam at even one small thing / maybe even a big thing that could make a difference.
Now, add something just with addressing the systemic things as an employee. No, yes, employee, not employer. It can feel daunting because you go, well, I'm there all in all day. I don't have time to do this. I want to change this thing, but I don't have time to do it, and I'm going to do it for free. And I actually say to people, I say to younger vets, go to your boss, identify the biggest problem, do the maths on what fixing that would be worth to the business, and actually go to the boss and say, hey, I want to take this on as a project. Can I have 2-3 hours a week, not on the clinic floor, where I can work on this in work hours? And I'm going to, if I fix this, I'm going to save you $120,000 a year in fees. And if I fix it, can you pay me half of what I save you or 20% of what I save you in addition to my wage or something? And like, pitch it as a business idea. If you can solve your problem, you're going to solve a lot of other people's problem, and it's going to solve a big problem for your boss. And that's worth money, because otherwise, if you take on one of these things, you're just going to add another to-do to your list and feel more overwhelmed and disappointed with yourself because you're not getting around to doing it. But make time to do it and take it seriously as part of your job. Helps a lot.
I think every single clinic owner should say yes to that. But, also just don't forget that if I had a machine where you could put $10 in and it spit $100 out, I would just keep feeding money into that machine until it stopped working. And so if you can invest 15 minutes, even if it's on your own time, to get 15 minutes back every single week or 30 minutes back every single week, there is a selfish incentive to just do it, even if you can't convince your clinic owner that it benefits you, because it's just selfishly, it makes your life better. And in fact, what you'll see with a lot of my clients who go through my boot camp is once they've changed all the things they can in their direct area of control, they'll often go outside of their area of control and build a system outside of their area of control. Somebody who worked in Australia for a Big Four global bank, she started going to her cross-functional teams and building systems for those teams. And they looked at her like she was like Mother Teresa. And only she knew that it was actually extremely selfish. This cross-functional team's inability to manage their pipeline was creating problems for her and was creating emergencies for her. So in her mind, she was like, I'm not doing this for the business. I'm actually doing this because your bad planning is constituting my emergencies. And so I'm doing this for my own sanity and my workflow as much as anybody else. But she actually did get a huge award and got flown out to meet the CEO and everything. So she was seen as like that amazing employee, but secretly deep down, it was selfish. She was fixing the system because it was just creating so much collateral damage in her life.
That's definitely something to think about because I always have those little thoughts throughout the day that's like, this could be done better. This could be done better. And they're fleeting, so I forget them. I feel like writing them down would be a good idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hugh, what you said, what I thought was really profound was, how many clinic owners would say yes to, hey, could I have an hour a week or 2 hours a week just to improve processes? Would you be okay with that? Just give me an hour or two just to create systems, build something out, create better processes here. I've got this list as long as my arm, and I'm going to tackle it from the easy stuff to the medium hard stuff to the hard stuff. And I'll just try to track where we're getting efficiencies in this. Again, you're not just doing it out of the kindness of your heart. You're doing it. That list is going to be ordered by the things that affect you the most to the things that affect you the least. So there really is a selfish benefit here. Raymond, I'm going to pass it to you. As we wrap up here, if you were just to pick out one or two things that are just standing out for you, maybe one or two ideas that you're having or one or two themes that we talked about, what do you think that would be?
Well, I think, like you said earlier, the 1% I can control, that's actually something that has hit home for me because I don't know, I've thought about it before, but like I haven't really put it into words as the 1% I can control. There are things I can control at work. And I always say to myself, like, oh, why isn't this being done? It would be so much easier for me if this was being done before an appointment or whatever. And that's absolutely something that I could ask a receptionist or a nurse to do. It's not, it's something that's doable, I think.
Mm.
And instead of just being like, oh, why isn't this being fixed and expecting someone else to figure it out, taking it upon myself whenever I have a little bit of free time. So I really like that one. And then,
I'll put a little cheesy saying on that. Upstream change beats downstream effort. Upstream change beats downstream effort. So 1% sounds great, but sometimes it is a moment to step away and say, hey, maybe I need to take 1 or 2 steps upstream so I can do less effort downstream.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking also the expectations through the day. I think completing tasks with the expectation that there is going to be chaos upcoming would be beneficial for me. Because I feel like if I don't have a ton through the day, the work spreads itself out to fill that day. But if I treat it like there's going to be something coming in, I could truly have like, I'll always be ready, I guess. Like I won't have a task that I was about to work on and then an emergency comes in and it's like, oh, well, now I have to do that later. And that would prevent, I think, a lot of stress for me.
And as a bonus, prepare you very well to have kids if you think you're going to have kids soon in life.
Fair enough.
Nothing will prepare you for that. Don't lie to me.
You're so right.
Hey, I'm asking this not as a productivity coach, but as an experienced veterinarian who's been through a lot of this, Ray. Is it possible, if you say you get home at 9, is that because your work shift requires that, or are you staying late after work? Like, are you staying back to do things? Basically, my question is there any way that you can work a little bit less as well? Whether that's an hour shorter, negotiating with your employer, or an extra half a day off. I know the driver for how much we work is very often how much money we need to earn to repay student loans and whatever. But I just asked because the biggest change for me in my experience of veterinary practice is not just doing so bloody much of it. And I've heard a lot of people say the same thing. The difference from a 50-hour vet week to a 30-hour vet week means hating it or actually really enjoying it.
It has been a recent change that I do these 12-hour shifts, but what I was figuring, and I approved it, like I was asked beforehand. But what the major thing was that I felt like even on my when I was doing shorter shifts, I do have about a 30-minute to an hour, depending on traffic, commute both ways. So I guess now part of the reason I get home so late is the commute. But I do finish around 8, but I will sometimes stay late. Like just a couple of days ago, I stayed till I was at the clinic till 9:30 because I saw I've reflected on the case, but it was just I probably could have split it up, but I just dealt with it at that point, and they came in 30 minutes before close. But I felt on the days before the shift changed to longer that even though I was getting home a little bit earlier, I still didn't feel like doing anything. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, why don't I just have an extra day off every other week
Okay.
and instead get home and feel like doing nothing later?
No, I get it. No. So you basically, the swing was you gave yourself an extra off day, which no, I
Yeah.
don't think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know. Do you have any comments on that?
It's going to be completely feel. I've had clients who just realize that, you know, there is this nonlinear aspect of work. Have you ever, Hugh, had that moment where you said, I should stop work now, but then there was that one thing that took just 30 more minutes, and if you had left work, you knew you would have left in a good mood, but you stayed that extra 30 minutes, and somehow the entire jar of milk soured just in that. You just felt yourself go over the edge in that little extra bit of work that you did. And so I would open Ray up to the idea of like looking internally for where that moment hits. And it could hit not just inside of a day, but in a week. If I work these many days consecutively, or if I work these many hours inside of one day, there can often be these sort of tipping moments where you sort of learn about yourself. Oh, it's exactly 9.5 hours. Boy, if I work past 9.5 hours, I've done this on my week. If I work, there's something that happens between 30 and 35 hours a week where I just get sort of like into a bad version of myself. Right now, of course I can work much longer hours, but if I work under 30 hours a week or around 30 hours a week, I'm just a really happy boy. Right. I'm just like the best version of myself. And so I have these little thresholds where it's like at 27, I feel like the luckiest man in the world. At 30, I'm super happy. At 33, I'm starting to get grumpy. By 35, I'm coming home. And even if I'm still awake, I'm just pissy and grumpy. And so you can find those thresholds, not because some productivity coach told you, but simply because you're actually paying more attention and just feeling into your energy and looking at how the days are going. So I would just say, Hugh, the only thing I would say is, you know, if you don't fall over that cliff, pick whatever number suits you. And I think some people will say, I'll work the longer hours and take the extra day off. And some people will say, you know what? I'm so grumpy from the extra hours that I'm just grumpy on my day off. I'm going to go back to the shorter hours. You made a face, Ray.
Yeah, no,
I wonder what that's about.
I often feel my first day off is just a waste because I don't do anything.
Totally. So, but when Demir was talking earlier about that, because we function on such high cortisol level, I think it's a cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline and dopamine and all sorts. And I don't know if you experience the same, Ray, but we take a holiday and I'm going to go away for a week and have a great time, and I've got all this planned, but for the first 3 days I'm depressed. I can't move. I can't get out of bed. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with me? I'm supposed to have fun. And I think it's that hangover, that hormone neurotransmitter hangover. And yes, I agree. It is finding your sweet spot. But it's so interesting to me hearing you say 30 hours. Now, for most vets listening to this, they're like, who gets to work 30 hours? That's a holiday. That's not work. But I agree with you. With my podcasting work and everything else, I do way more. But it's necessity. But the goal is, I know I need to get it back because I exactly experienced that, because it becomes less fun. Doing the same thing too much, it's too taxing, and then you don't enjoy it. So how do you not like veterinary science? Well, you do too much of it. I tell a story of I love surfing. That gives me great joy. But I've gone on surf trips to perfect surf destinations where you spend thousands of dollars to go surfing. So you feel like you have to surf all day, every day. And by day 4, I'm sick of it. I don't want to do it anymore.
I mean, remember, this is from somebody who used to work 80 to 100 hours a week and gave themselves a chronic stress-related illness that almost killed me. So been there, done that. But, you know, I often say, if you want to live happier than a billionaire, even if I, hit the lotto and won $1 billion, I'd still want to program a day for myself where I had 4 to 5 hours of meaningful work. So a lot of people don't have that luxury. Totally understand. This is not about rubbing salt, but it's just sort of saying that I think sometimes when we're working too much, the fantasy is working nothing. We actually realize that really, even people who don't have to work anymore often find themselves in a place where they will give themselves 4 to 5 hours of good work because that is a good day. A great day includes 4 to 5 meaningful hours of working on something that you love, even if you don't need the money.
For people who do want to follow up, I'm going to be one of those people. Where do we find you, Demir? What's the best place to keep learning from you?
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me here. And thank you, Ray, for just opening yourself up and sharing the details of your life. I really appreciate it. Anybody who wants to follow us, we're at lifehackmethod.com. There's a free training on planning your week to win your week. We didn't get into that, but it's the Wall Street Journal best-selling book that we wrote, Winning the Week. So for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about us and learn a bit more about the smallest thing you could do to get the most time back, check out the website, lifehackmethod.com.
Ray, thank you so much for being brave and putting your hand up and being vulnerable. If I kept laughing when I listened to you, it wasn't laughing at you. It was just because it's so familiar. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think our listeners will feel the same. And thank you for letting us use you as a template.
Thank you for having me. It was really good to be here.
Before you disappear, I wanted to tell you about my weekly newsletter. I speak to so many interesting people and learn so many new things while making the clinical podcast. So I thought I'd create a little summary each week of the stuff that stood out for me. We call it the VetVault 321, and it consists of 3 clinical pearls. These are 3 things that I've taken away from making the clinical podcast episodes. My light bulb moments. 2 other things. These could be quotes, links, movies, books, a podcast highlight, maybe even from my own podcast. Anything that I've come across outside of clinical vetting that I think that you might find interesting. And then 1 thing to think about, which is usually something that I'm pondering this week and that I'd like you to ponder with me. If you'd like to get these in your inbox each week, then follow the newsletter link in the show description wherever you're listening. It's free, and I'd like to think it's useful. Okay, we'll see you next time.